Today I have with me Luca Lamporiello, whom I consider to be the, certainly, maybe not in terms of numbers of language, because there's Moses out there with, I don't know, 50, but in terms of pronunciation, certainly one of the most accomplished polyglots in the polyglotosphere. And I want to probe, who is Luca? Why did he become a polyglot? Where does that take him? So, Luca, welcome and thank you for being on my channel.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Steve. It's always nice to see you, to talk to you. Remember the last time we met, I think twice, right?
Yes.
Is that possible? Just twice?
Bratislava we met?
Yeah, we did. And I think that's it. No, we met some other time, I think, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. Now, you know, when I first met you, like when I first saw you, was when you were looking out your window in Rome. And here's this Italian guy. Now, this has got to be 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And here's this Italian guy, and he's speaking English and German and all this stuff out of his balcony window in this big apartment complex in Rome. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And here we are 12 or 15 years later, and you have now learned a number of other languages. So, first question is, where are you right now? Because you travel the world.
Right now, because of the pandemic, I am in Rome. Normally, at this time, we'll be traveling around Europe, especially my beloved Poland. But, it's been like over the last, I think in the last 5 years, I've always been traveling between April and September because, I think you know that in Rome it's pretty warm, especially these days in the summer. So I was supposed to be in Poland right now, but I'm not stuck in Rome. I love it, but I'm in Rome right now, and I think I'll be in Rome for at least the next 2 months.
I see they're opening up Italy now, opening up to tourists and stuff.
Yep.
You know, for all the fans of Italy all over the world, and I consider myself a fan of Italy, in terms of all the history I've read about Italy, of traveling in Italy, hearing the music of Italy, we wish Italy the best. It's really, really disappointing to see what's happened. And hopefully we all come through this.
We're going to prevail. We're going to overcome. Italians are very resilient.
I know that. I know the Italians have more savings stocked away than anybody, actually.
It's true. It's true.
They're prudent. Question. Luca the polyglot. When you were a boy, 10, 12, 14, did you ever think of yourself as a future polyglot?
I got to tell you the truth that at the age of 12, I didn't myself as a polyglot. I didn't see myself speaking all these languages. But one thing that I do remember very well is that my grandmother and my father and my mother were talking constantly about learning and about the beauty of learning, about the power of learning. So I remember we were at this summer house, and then all of a sudden my grandmother just said, she was a math teacher, and she told me, "Hey, Luca, do you want to, try a little bit of Latin and a little bit of mathematics?" And I remember as clear as if it were now, that I sat down, I was curious, and we started doing Latin and French and mathematics. And that was right in the middle of the summer, where I was supposed to be running and chasing kids on a beach. And instead I was I was not spending the entire afternoon with her. I was spending maybe some 60 minutes. But I think that was the moment where my grandmother planted the seed. And the seed was this thirst for knowledge, because a lot of people, I think they see me as the polyglot, quote unquote, who speaks a bunch of languages, but I live through languages. I live my life through languages. My life does not revolve, in a way it does revolve around languages, but I use languages. I really enjoy the moment where I can use a language in order to explore a different world. For me, languages don't work in a vacuum. So, at the age of 12, I did not think I would become a polyglot, but I do remember that 3 years later, when I was at school, I was scribbling down all the languages that I wanted to learn. I still have it somewhere. I still have...
Amazing.
The teacher was giving like a lecture. She was talking about something. I was already writing like 1996, I want to learn this. 1997, I want to learn that. I do remember that because recently, when I was arranging stuff, I found it, and that actually happened. So I think I believe that we shape our own reality by thinking and imagining about the things that are going to happen. So at the age of 15, I was already aware that I wanted to become a polyglot, but at the age of 12, I was aware that I wanted to become a permanent lifelong learner.
So, what I take from that is that the first condition of becoming a polyglot is curiosity, the desire to learn.
Agreed,
And
100%.
yeah, and I share that entirely. It's so much fun because of all the things we discover. But by the age of 15, you were already, call it ambitious. You were already saying, geez, you know, not only do I like learning, but I'm setting myself certain goals. So then, what was the order in which you learned the different languages?
It's a very good question. At the age of 12, when I got into middle school in Italy, I was learning English at school until actually from 10 till 13. And then I started learning French at high school. That was the only language I was learning. And at the age of 15, I started learning German. 1996, I remember that there was some ad I watched on television. I just decided to go for German. 1 year later, I started learning Spanish. That was in 1998, if I'm not wrong. Actually, 2 years later. Then I started learning Dutch because I met I met a Dutch girl, and 3 months later I was writing love letters, and that was the reason why I wanted to learn Dutch. 1999. Then I started to learn. After that, I think it was Swedish. That was 2002. And then I started learning Russian in 2004. And then 4 years later, I started learning Mandarin Chinese and Portuguese. That was in I think it was 2008, because I got so enthusiastic about the responses I had gotten from making a YouTube video.
Right.
I made that YouTube video on the 22nd of May, 2008, and I was in Barcelona. And I honestly thought, okay, just like, for the hell of it, I just wanted to say, what the heck, I'm just going to make a video. And then the responses were so positive, so generous that I just, that kind of enthused me and pushed me to learn languages at a historical moment of my life where I had almost given up learning languages, because I told myself, okay, I've been learning a bunch of languages, that's fine. And I didn't know where life would bring me, because I was on the path of, I wanted to become an engineer. And that reignited the power, the beauty, and the will to learn languages. And then after that, I started learning Japanese. And after
That's 2008.
2008, I started learning Mandarin and Portuguese.
So when was the big sort of turning point after the famous video in the window? I thought it was Rome. Turns out it's Barcelona.
It was Barcelona.
Yeah.
It was like the very first video was in Barcelona. All the other videos I made after that were at my sister's apartment in Rome when I went back.
All right.
So that was a turning point. I would say that the two main turning points of my life as a polyglot life are in 1996, when I discovered my bidirectional translation method. You know that I use a certain method to discover to learn a language.
Yep.
And I was 15, and I applied that with German. And the second breakthrough was when I started making YouTube videos, because I just realized that I was not alone. First, there was a community out there, and third, I really learned, because I thought that when you live I didn't know a lot of other polyglots out there. So what happened is that when you discover people like Steve, you were one of the first I discovered, Stu J. Ray or Professor Aguelis or Richard Simcott, I discovered that people learned in very different ways. So I integrated, I started integrating and understanding more principles and integrating what was good and what I liked of their method, and that changed everything. And I kind of remember you talked about this as well. I said, I had my method. I was convinced that my method was good, but by learning and by talking to other people, we learn from each other. That's the beauty of the internet.
Let me ask you a question. So 2008 was a turning point. 2015 was a turning point. So if we say 2008, you already had, if I remember now, you had, of course, Italian, Spanish, French, English, Mandarin. Like you had like half a dozen languages at least under your belt. So how many languages have you learned since then?
From 2008?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Well, if you consider the moment I started learning Mandarin was 2008. If you include that would be Mandarin, Portuguese, Japanese, Hungarian, Greek, and I'm currently learning Danish, so that
Okay.
would be 6. Yeah,
Okay.
and now I've been learning 14 languages, obviously, plus Latin, but Latin is not a language I speak, so
Okay.
I wouldn't consider that.
So now I have so many questions I want to ask you, but first, simple question. When we are always asked, like, how many languages do you speak? In my own case, I can give a total number of the languages that I have studied, and let's say half of them I can speak now, and half of them I would have to kind of refresh them in order to be actually able to carry on a conversation. Even though at one point when I was visiting Crete, I could speak Greek. If you came at me in Greek right now, I would be totally tongue-tied. In your case, 14 languages. You can turn them all on, or there's some that maybe you'd be a bit tongue-tied.
I would be tongue-tied, especially in Japanese, as I originally made a video about that I don't speak it fluently by any stretch of the imagination, or there's a couple of languages that I would not be able to speak right now. It would be very tongue-tied because these are languages that I don't speak very often.
Right.
That would be Mandarin Chinese right now, Japanese, that would be, I think, these two particularly. In general, I think that what we have to consider, a lot of people do not consider that, is that multilingual people's abilities vary with time. So it means that at a certain point of time, because of personal reasons, when I had, for example, when I was in a relationship with my ex-Russian girlfriend, my Russian was very, very smooth. I could speak it because I spoke it every single day.
Right.
But there's two main differences, there's two main factors that you have to take into account when it comes to language learning. There's two things. One is storage, and the other one is retrieval, meaning that we store things in our long-term memory. So I have Russian stored. I have a lot of info. I have a lot of words, etc. But retrieval is the mechanism that becomes a little bit rusty. You can imagine like a mechanical arm that goes and fetches words that you need for a conversation. If you don't speak the language that often, plus you might have interference from other languages, then that becomes rusty. So in my case, my Russian right now is not as good as it was, and my Polish now is much better in terms of, my Russian is better in terms of knowledge, but my Polish is more fluent because I use it more often. So to answer your question, I would say that out of the 14 languages that I have been learning, I would say that I speak at the drop of a hat. If you ask me, hey, let's have a conversation in, say, whatever language is under your belt, I would say 10 languages is a safe number where I could hold a conversation and I would say enjoy the conversation. There are different degrees of obviously fluency in some languages like English or Spanish or Italian or French for that matter. I would be able to express myself very fluently. It's never a zero-sum game. It's never either you speak or you don't. Right? There's so many shades of fluency.
Exactly. And then you have the people who say, yeah, but you made a mistake in your Spanish, or you didn't know the word for something, which doesn't matter at all. Sometimes you get people saying, well, if you don't know how to say tie your shoelaces in a language, then you can't claim to speak it. There are always holes. It doesn't matter how well you speak a language. I think I speak French quite well, but I know if I ever listen to myself in an interview, I'll see, I made a mistake there, I made a mistake there. There's always holes. So perfection is not the goal.
I think there's this kind of, I call it the YouTube syndrome.
Yeah.
It's like the perfectionism syndrome. Some people, a lot of comments that you get says more about the people who left the comment than actually about you. That's always the case in everything, because when people tend to be very critical of the some mistakes you made, they're maybe not that sure of themselves, because a person who has a positive attitude towards learning is a person who takes, oh wow, he always sees the glass half full and say, what can I learn? What do I admire of this person? How can I learn from this person? Instead of seeing, the holes. And we'll never speak any language perfectly. Perfection, including our own, does not exist. Making mistakes is the best thing that can happen to you if you want to learn.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Now, I have two other things I want to get to. One is the method. So, you said that maybe it was 2008, you discovered your bidirectional translation method. How does that work? And including that, what are some of the principles that you use to learn these many languages and to speak them despite what we just said, at a very high level. All of them. I've heard you, obviously, in Russian. You lived in Russia, but you speak it phenomenally well. But even when we had our conversation in Mandarin, in Japanese, you're very, very good. So what's the method?
Thank you. Thank you. You always flatter me too much, Steve. Just one thing. I've never lived in Russia. The only countries I lived in are Spain and France.
Sorry, my mistake. But you visited, or you never visited?
I was there 3 times for a stint for a period of 3 weeks because I visited my girlfriend 3 or 4 times.
All right. Anyway,
it doesn't matter.
Very good Russian. Doesn't matter.
Thank you. So, in answer to your question, the method is called the bidirectional translation method. It's not a method to learn a language fully. There's a lot of misunderstandings around this. For me, this method is a method where I use my own native language as a crutch, or I leverage the knowledge I have in my own native language in order to dissect, understand, and absorb the main structures, the main patterns of any other foreign language. So basically, I use texts. I start with beginner's material that normally contains a bilingual version, meaning you have my own native language on the one side, and then I have the other language on the other side, and then I translate first. I dissect the text, then I translate it into my own native language onto a piece of paper or into a Google Docs, because I personalize this, because a lot of people say, oh, why would you do that if you already have the text in your own native language? There's a lot of reasons why. And then after a couple of days, timing is really important because of space-time system and how our brain remembers, I translate it back into the language I am learning. And I have found this to be an extremely effective method. That was the first breakthrough in 1996 when I applied it to German. After 2 or 3 months of pounding my head on the wall, not understanding how to deal with German, then I tried this method and it worked really well. And then in hindsight, I understood that the reason why this method works really well is, first of all, because I like it. Because if you don't like it, and to each his own, it's not going to work. You always have to do something you like in language learning. Never do something you dislike. That's first. That's what I discovered. Second, I discovered that it works so well because you might have noticed, this is ironic, that around the world, people at school in classrooms, normally they do not learn languages well. It's very rare that a person learns a language after going to school. Right. And I've been wondering why doesn't it work? But why does this education system does not work? Well, goes beyond the scope of this conversation, the education system and why it is outdated, but in terms of language learning, I think that one of the reasons why this doesn't work is that adults have the capacity of learning languages, like Steve Krashen says it too. The only problem is that we often sabotage ourselves and do it backwards. Just to give you an idea, to me, comprehensible input is really important. That is a condition, that's the most important condition, obviously, the factor. But the other factor, if you think about it, is that we have 2 different circuitry in our brain. One is declarative memory, and the other one is procedural memory. So in other words, for those who are not familiar with the terms, declarative memory is something that has to do with how many words you acquire, right? That's the pieces of information like dates, like names, words in a foreign language. The other one is called procedural or implicit memory and has to do with how we form sentences. So if you observe a 5-year-old kid speaking their own native language, they speak their language perfectly, but they do not know a lot of vocab, right? So what this method does is that it actually activates both circuitries of our brain. You learn words, but you always learn words by embedding them in sentences. So when you translate something, you're transferring a thought from your native language into a foreign language by not just translating the single words, but doing it backwards. It's always the meaning, and then you have the words as a consequence of that. You have to imagine like having a spider web. You build a structure, and the words get stuck in there like flies. So, it takes time to explain, but in hindsight, I've realized that this works very well because I tested it on myself and it worked wonderfully well. But I've been training hundreds of people I'm a language coach. I've been training hundreds of people I don't think there's anyone who disliked this method. The
Right.
people who wanted to take it just took it. They loved it, you know, with one caveat, which is very important. This is not a method that is after which, if you apply it for 3 months, you're going to be speaking a language.
Right.
Far from that.
That method doesn't exist.
It does. Well, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
It exists insofar as it's a combination of methods that evolve with time.
No, sorry. What I meant to say is the method whereby you go from 0 to speaking fluently in 3 months doesn't exist.
Well, in my...
You can learn to say a few things in 3 months and sound fluent. But in my experience, in order to be comfortable speaking a language, you actually need a lot of words and a lot of familiarity with the language, which is not acquired in 3 months.
I would say this. First, let me finish describing this method, and then I'll tell you what I think about this. So by applying this method, at the end of the 3-month or 4-month period, that helps you actually familiarize yourself with the basic structures. Your brain is more absorbs better, understands better, and then when you go and look maybe at some grammar notes, you understand things. Oh, well, down the line you understand things that were not clear before. So, but again, in 3 months, I would say that the only chance that I always say that, well, can you learn to speak a language in 3 months? The only possibility that you have to speak a language, and it depends on what you mean by speak.
Right.
To speak a language in 3 months, I would say to hold a conversation would be if the language were very close to yours,
Right.
if you had a lot of time at your hand, if you lived in that country, if you had a partner who speaks the language, if you spoke 10 hours a day, then if you're an experienced polyglot, but normally over if you consider the entire spectrum, it's not going to cut it.
Let's say that if you have Spanish and you want to learn Italian and you're living in Italy, 3 months is ample. You'll do it. But
that's
Greek,
possible.
Greek, Turkish.
Greek is a little bit more difficult. Turkish is even more complicated.
Right.
I mean, on a scale to I would say, if I'm from the point of view, you always have to consider your native language, Italian. In my case, the closest language in terms of not only structure, syntax, and vocab and whatnot is Spanish. Not even Portuguese, because the pronunciation and the intonation are quite similar.
Right.
Again, 3 months, but you have to be really focused 10 hours a day in the environment and everything else. For most cases, I would say it takes a lot of time. The brain does something amazing. It's called also the compound effect. If you learn every day for a long period of time, time will be your best friend. So don't be in a rush, because if you try to cram as much information as possible in 3 months, then you're going to forget everything. So it's always a marathon. It's never ever a sprint.
Now, Luca, I'm going to leave a link in the description box to where they can find you for people who want to pursue this translation method. We're also going to have an interview later on for your YouTube channel where you can ask me all kinds of questions. Yes. But I certainly must say that what you said there, people sometimes say, well, you should only use a monolingual dictionary and blah, blah, blah. I think relating, and similarly with the grammar, not emphasizing the grammar until you've had enough experience with the language. I have always found that I learn, this is the way we say it in Chinese. This is how we say it in English. I have never understood any of the grammatical terms or grammatical explanations. I relate it to my language or a language that I know very well. This is how they say it in this new language. This is how we say it in a language that I'm familiar with. And I kind of connect the two without any intermediary explanation, grammatical terms and all this stuff, which just confuses me. So to that extent, I must admit, the other thing you said, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is you have to like the method you're using, and you have to believe in the method and stay with it. So if someone starts the bidirectional translation method, and maybe I should try that for Arabic, where I'm struggling here, you have to believe in it, you have to like doing it. And if you do that, you'll succeed.
That's absolutely true. You're a wise man, Steve.
No, I'm not. I'm an older man than you, though. So let's finish off with, where does this take you? You love languages. I love languages. You are a language coach. Is that the ultimate goal? Are you still exploring new languages? What does the next 5 years look like for Luca?
Oh, that's a big question. I could not anticipate too much, but I would just say that the direction that the path that I've taken is a mission for not just education in terms of language learning, but education in general. My mission is to help people be more aware of the power of education and self-education. So it's a broader scope. So when I see myself is like doing something and reaching millions of people, whether it's possible or not, life will allow me to do that, and see how like language learning is just one part of the entire thing. It's a matter of awareness, being a citizen of the world, self-education. Through language learning, I have realized a number of things that most people are oblivious of. And I'm not saying that I'm like the enlightened one.
Right.
Far from that. I'm just understood through language learning that a lot of people think in the box instead of outside of the box, and they don't see the possibilities that the power of education can confer to their lives in terms of, imagine the amount of people nowadays who have the internet at their disposal, but they don't know what to do when it comes to learning a language. They don't know how to use the tools that they have. They're confused by the amount of possibilities and websites and platforms. Imagine being able to have that clarity over like for a lot of other things like sports, awareness. That is where this is taking me, because I'm becoming more and more aware. I'm in a path where language learning does occupy some place, but I'm doing like I'm delving into neuroscience, coaching, psychology, leadership, history, philosophy. I'm a very, very different person than I was 5 years before, and I've learned that the best mission that I can have in my life is not about myself, is to serve other people, to help people see what they cannot see, and what I've seen, not because I'm better than anybody else, but because I had the luxury, life has given me the luxury and the possibility of realizing this at the ripe age of 39.
39, wow, okay.
39.
Well, listen,
39.
we will be picking up this conversation on your channel, but I thank you very much. And of course, it's not possible in 25 minutes to cover all the subjects that we would like to cover together. Maybe we should do this from time to time. But thank you very much for joining me. So where can people find you?
People can find me on www.lucalampariello.com or just by typing Luca Lampariello on Google, and they will find my YouTube. I also have a YouTube channel that goes by the name of Luca Lampariello, no fantasy there. So if you type Luca Lampariello on Google, on YouTube, and you will find my blog, and you will find my YouTube channel, and I'm there to help you and serve you guys. The last thing I wanted to say, Steve, is I think that since you're an interesting guy, hopefully I'm also an interesting guy, and people might have a lot of questions. Maybe they can have questions and we can collect them for another video, and they can ask us all the questions.
Please put your questions in the comment area. We're going to leave a link to Luca's, various presences on the internet. And hopefully this is a conversation we can continue.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Luca.
Ciao.